When we think of clowns, we often associate them with humorous figures who bring joy to people. However, behind that dazzling mask sometimes lies a terrifying truth. In the 1970s, a man from Chicago would dress up as a clown to perform at parties and charity events. His name was John Wayne Gacy, a man nobody ever suspected to be one of America's most infamous serial killers, dubbed the Killer Clown. With a friendly exterior that concealed horrific crimes, Gacy's story not only sends shivers down the spine, but also leaves society with important lessons. Join us as we explore the detailed developments of this case below. The story takes place in Illinois, located in the Midwest of the United States, with its capital in Springfield. Illinois is one of America's major agricultural states, with 80% of its land used for farming. The land in the northern and central parts of the state is extremely fertile, regarded as some of the best arable land in the world. Chicago, the largest city in the state and the third largest in America after New York and Los Angeles, is situated on the south shore of Lake Michigan. With a thriving economy, Chicago is home to over 2 million people. The main character of the story, John Wayne Gacy, was born in Chicago on March 20th, 1942. His father worked as an auto mechanic, while his mother was a housewife. He was the second child in his family, with an older sister and a younger sister. His grandparents had immigrated to the United States from Poland. John carried the bloodlines of Polish and Danish heritage, and his family was Catholic. His childhood, marked by overeating and little physical activity, resulted in obesity. John had very few peers with whom he played, mostly spending time with his mother and 2 sisters. At age 11, while playing, John accidentally fell and suffered a severe head injury. Although it initially appeared minor, in reality, John suffered internal organ damage. It wasn't until he was 16 that a brain hemorrhage from that injury was diagnosed. A year later, John was diagnosed with heart problems. However, his physical suffering never managed to defeat him. At 18, he began engaging in politics, working as an assistant to a Democratic district representative. In 1963, at the age of 21, John graduated from Northwest College, the predecessor of what is now Northwest Business College, a college located in Bridgeview, Illinois. Afterwards, John worked as a management trainee at a shoe company. Only a year later, he was promoted to foreman. In that same year, he married a colleague named Marlyn Myers. Marlyn's father was wealthy, having purchased 3 KFC fast food restaurants for the couple in Waterloo, Iowa. After moving there, John and Marlyn had a son and a daughter together. However, the marital relationship quickly deteriorated, lasting only 5 years. Following their divorce, custody of the children and property, such as the house, went to Marlyn. 2 years later, at age 29, John returned to his native Chicago and secured a job as a chef at a local restaurant. With his mother's help, John purchased a house on West Summerdale in the town of Norwood Park. In August of that year, John moved into the new home with his mother. Not long after, John rekindled a past relationship with Carol, his high school girlfriend. John always harbored the desire to provide himself and his loved one with a prosperous life. He founded a construction company named PDM, which stands for Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance. By day, John worked as a chef in his restaurant, and by night he devoted his time to his construction company. 1 year after rekindling his romance with Carol, John and Carol married. Carol, who had previously experienced a failed marriage, brought her 2 daughters to live with John to maintain harmony in their new life. Out of consideration for his new wife's children, John's mother moved out before the wedding. 1 year after their marriage, John decided to resign from his chef job in order to fully concentrate on his company. Initially, John's business did not have many customers, taking on only small repair jobs. However, the business gradually expanded into interior design, decoration, and landscape design. As the company quickly developed, John often worked more than 16 hours a day, keeping himself so busy that he hardly had time to care for his children or nurture his marital relationship. By the 5th year of his marriage, when John turned 34, his marriage to Carol reached its breaking point, and the two divorced officially in March of that year. Despite his misfortune in love, everything else in John's life seemed to be going well. In the eyes of the neighborhood, John was a kind and enthusiastic man. He even went as far as clearing the sidewalks of snow after heavy snowfall. From 1974 to 1978, John regularly organized summer parties that attracted over 400 people, including several local political figures. John actively participated in the local Democratic Party's political activities, and thanks to his good reputation within the community, he was elected as a district representative. On May 6, 1978, John was even invited to meet and have his photo taken with the First Lady of the United States at the time, now Rosalind Carter. However, it seemed that John always carried a mysterious mask. No one could truly see through the man behind it. Until one day, John's true face was finally exposed. Who was John, really? What heinous crimes had he committed? To better understand John Wayne Gacy, let us turn back time to December 11th, 1978. On Monday, December 11th, 1978, during the cold, snowy winter of Chicago, an event unfolded in Des Plaines, located northwest of Chicago. That night, a woman called the police to report her son's disappearance. According to initial information, her son, Robert, was 15 years old and worked part-time at the Nissan pharmacy near their home. It was Robert's birthday that day. Robert's mother had driven to the pharmacy to pick him up after work and planned to celebrate his birthday at home. When she arrived, Robert said he could not go home yet because earlier a construction contractor had come to the pharmacy looking for him with a job offer to work at a construction site for double his usual wage. Robert intended to meet the contractor after finishing work and then return home to celebrate his birthday with his mother. However, Robert never arrived home by 11 p.m. His mother had not seen him nor received any call from him. Worried about her son's safety, she decided to call the police for help in finding him. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately began the investigation. They first questioned the pharmacy manager, who stated that Robert had left the pharmacy at 9 p.m. Earlier, a construction contractor named John Wayne Gacy had visited the pharmacy to discuss business. The police then focused their investigation on this contractor. They learned that John lived in Norwood Park, east of Des Plaines, and was a fairly well-known figure in the local community. In addition, John was a member of a clown club. He frequently dressed as a clown, distributed gifts, and performed for children in the community. Everyone in the neighborhood adored John's clown persona. However, the investigation revealed that in Waterloo, Iowa, during his 4th year after marrying his first wife, Marlene, John had been convicted and sentenced to 15 years for drug-related offenses. Moreover, there were suspicions that he had been involved in drug offenses and sexual misconduct with 2 teenagers and had also administered drugs to some young boys. During that period, his first wife, Marlene, had filed for divorce. Although John's tendency toward homosexual behavior had manifested very early on, his first wife had been completely unaware. John had employed many teenagers in his KFC fast food restaurants and even established a club in the basement of his workplace exclusively for employees to drink and play billiards. Before assaulting these minors, John would serve them alcohol until they were intoxicated. If any victim resisted, he would claim that it was all in playful jest. During his incarceration at Anamosa State Prison, John was considered a model inmate. Merely months after entering prison, he was promoted to head chef, and he actively participated in several programs aimed at improving living conditions for inmates. Owing to his good behavior, John was pardoned after serving only 18 months. Thereafter, he returned to Chicago. After marrying his second wife, Carol, John frequently brought strange young men to his garage. When Carol questioned John, he eventually confessed that he was homosexual. The couple then separated and eventually divorced. As time passed into the next day, after 24 hours had elapsed since Robert's disappearance, 2 police officers called John's house. At that time, the 36-year-old John stated that he had been at the pharmacy that day, observed by 2 employees there, and claimed he did not know who Robert was. John insisted that he had never offered Robert a job, asserting that his only reason for visiting the pharmacy was to inquire about potential remodeling opportunities. When the police requested that John come to the station for questioning, he excused himself by saying that his uncle had just died and that it was inconvenient for him to travel, promising to come in later. At 3:20 a.m. the following day, John appeared at the police station, covered in mud. Even the steps of his vehicle were caked with mud. John explained that he had just been involved in a car accident. The police later confirmed that his story was true. Confronted by the police's questions, John consistently denied any involvement in Robert's disappearance and reiterated that he had never offered Robert a job. However, when questioned about why he returned to the pharmacy at 8 p.m. that same day, John explained that the pharmacy manager had called him, claiming that he had left a note there. The police then requested that John write a detailed statement of all his activities that evening. During John's interrogation, the police finally obtained a search warrant for his home. They immediately went to John's residence on West Summerdale. At his home, the police discovered many suspicious items. They found several police badges and a handgun stored in a drawer. In the bathroom, they uncovered syringes, handcuffs, and several books on homosexuality. In the bathroom's wardrobe, they discovered some men's clothing that did not fit John. In the northwest-facing bedroom, investigators found a prohibited drug, several driver's licenses, and a 1975 high school class ring engraved with the initials JAS in the trash can in the room. They found a receipt from Nissen Pharmacy, along with a 91-centimeter-long nylon rope placed beside it. The police decided to impound John's Oldsmobile and all vehicles belonging to his construction company, PDM. Simultaneously, they assigned 2 groups, each with 2 officers, to take turns monitoring John 24/7 in search of additional clues. On the following Wednesday, after Robert's disappearance, investigators received a call from a witness. The caller reported that a year earlier, a man named Gregory had disappeared. Earlier that year, another one of John's employees, Charles, had drowned in a river in Illinois. The caller claimed that the deaths of both individuals were connected to John. The next day, police further investigated the tip and learned that a man named Jeffrey had reported that John had lured him into his vehicle, then sexually assaulted and beat him. After confessing everything, John abandoned Jeffrey in Lincoln Park. However, it wasn't until the next day that locals discovered Jeffrey. Despite being under 24/7 surveillance by the police, John remained very calm. He would even frequently invite surveillance officers out for meals at restaurants, drinks at bars, or for private visits to his home. Moreover, John continually denied any involvement in Robert's disappearance, accusing the police of harassing him for political reasons. Sometimes, to evade police surveillance, John would flagrantly break traffic laws in order to lose his tail. Another Oldsmobile owned by John had been sold to a man named Rossi, one of John's employees. Rossi had started working for PDM in May of the previous year and lived with John until April of the following year. With Rossi's consent, the police inspected the Oldsmobile. They found several strands of human-like hair in the trunk. However, due to the limitations of DNA technology at the time, these hairs could not provide any useful information. Next, the police brought in 3 well-trained K9 units. One of the dogs entered the vehicle, went to the front seats, and lay down on the passenger seat. an instinctive behavior indicating that a body had once been present in the car. In other words, the dog was suggesting that Robert had once been in that vehicle. On the 8th morning following Robert's disappearance, John once again invited the officers monitoring him to join him for breakfast at a restaurant. This time, John appeared very worried and exhausted. While there, he spoke with the investigators about his business, his marriage, and even his clown persona. At one point during the conversation, John suddenly blurted out, "You know, clowns can get away with anything." That afternoon, John drove to a lawyer's office to file a lawsuit against the Des Plaines Police Department, demanding that they cease surveillance of him and pay him $750,000 in compensation. On the same day, based on the Nissen pharmacy receipt found at John's house, the police approached Kimberly, one of Robert's colleagues at the pharmacy. Kimberly explained to the police that that day he was wearing a jacket in which the receipt was kept in the pocket. When he learned that Robert intended to leave the pharmacy to meet with the construction contractor, he took off his own jacket and lent it to Robert. This indicated that Robert had been with John before his disappearance, contradicting John's previous statement to the police. Rossi, the man who had bought the Oldsmobile from John, stated that the previous summer, at John's request, a large amount of quicklime was dumped into the crawl space beneath John's house. Upon hearing this, the police suspected something was amiss, because during the earlier search they had found no crawl space beneath the house. The police immediately requested a second search warrant. At the same time, John's lawyer filed a civil lawsuit against the Des Plaines Police Department. The trial was scheduled to begin 3 days later. However, that afternoon, John invited 2 of the investigators to his home in order to gather more evidence. One of the officers deliberately engaged John in conversation to distract him, while the other sneaked into John's bedroom. In the bedroom, the officer noticed a Motorola TV and suspected that it belonged to a missing person named Sick. As the officer was attempting to record the TV's serial number, John, standing at the door, noticed him. Immediately, the officer pretended to use the restroom to deflect John's attention. While flushing the toilet, the officer detected a strong, foul odor, suspecting that the smell might be coming from the heating pipe, a detail that had been overlooked during the previous search, possibly because the heating system had not been turned on. The next day, the police continued to interrogate Rossi. When asked where John might have concealed Robert's body, Rossi suggested it might have been hidden in the crawl space beneath John's house. Rossi was then taken aside for a lie detector test, which he eventually failed. Nonetheless, Rossi continued to insist that a body had indeed been concealed in the crawl space under John's house. The police also questioned a man named Cram, who stated that John had once attempted to assault him 2 years earlier. When Cram visited John's home, he noticed debris on the carpet. John's face immediately hardened. Shortly thereafter, John hurriedly grabbed a flashlight, lifted a floorboard, and crawled into the crawl space beneath the house. When asked by the police whether he had been in that space before, Cram revealed that John had asked him to help spread quicklime down there. In addition, Cram mentioned that he had also helped John dig several trenches measuring approximately 61 centimeters in width, 1.8 meters in length, and 61 centimeters in depth, dimensions akin to a grave. However, John explained that these were merely drainage ditches. Under intense police surveillance, John likely realized that his capture was inevitable. That day, he visited several friends to say his goodbyes. In a drunken stupor, John confessed to his friends that he had buried the bodies of most of his victims in the crawl space under his house and had disposed of 5 additional bodies in the Des Plaines River. After consuming too much alcohol, John quickly fell into a deep sleep. The following morning, upon awakening, John refused to meet the psychiatrist that his friends had arranged for him. Later, he drove to another friend's house, embraced the friend tightly, and burst into tears, confessing that he had killed 30 people. That was the last day John was free. That morning, the police received information about John's confession to his friends. Alarmed by John's unusual behavior, the police decided to arrest him immediately. When the police informed John that they would search the crawl space beneath his house for Robert's body, John denied that the boy had been buried there. The police then returned to John's home with a search warrant. Upon arrival, they found that John had removed the sewage pump, causing water to flood the entire crawl space beneath the house. After pumping out the water, they began to excavate. Within minutes, they uncovered a partially decomposed body with human bones. Because the remains were too far gone, the police determined that this was not Robert. Continuing their excavation, investigators found a skull along with the remains of 3 other victims next to the second body. One day after his arrest, John confessed to the police that he had killed roughly 30 youths. He explained that most of these individuals were runaways or prostitutes whom he picked up at train stations or on the streets of Chicago. John would use any pretext to lure them into his car, offering them well-paying jobs or feigning friendliness. Once his lies were discovered, he would resort to violence to subdue and abduct his victims. John would handcuff or tie up his victims to restrain them, then proceed with sexual assault and torture. He referred to these cruel acts as the handcuff game. Finally, he would strangle his victims to death with a rope. When asked why he did it, John stated that he had been inspired by the Houston Massacre, an incident in the late 1960s and early 1970s, during which 3 men killed at least 28 people. John typically lured his victims to his private residence one by one, although there were occasions when he killed 2 at once. He claimed that killing gave him a sense of ecstasy. It took the police a week of painstaking excavation at John's home, a week during which they uncovered a total of 27 sets of remains within the house. 26 sets were found in the crawl spaces beneath the bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom, and 1 set was found in the crawl space beneath the garage. Additionally, the police discovered 3 more bodies in a river in Des Plaines. After interring the bodies in the crawl space, John would frequently sprinkle quicklime to accelerate decomposition. He later claimed that he could no longer remember how many corpses he had hidden beneath his home. When questioned about Robert's whereabouts, John admitted that he had killed the boy. He explained that after hastily entering Robert's body, he had been in a rush to attend an appointment in Des Plaines and was involved in a traffic accident on the way, explaining why he showed up at the police station looking so disheveled in the early hours of the following morning. Due to an unexpected snowstorm that dumped up to 74 centimeters of snow on some areas of Chicago, the excavation of John's home was delayed. On March 9th, the 28th body was found in a pit near a meat oven in the yard, wrapped in several plastic bags. 7 days later, the 29th body was discovered beneath the dining room floor. Forensic experts eventually used biological techniques to identify 32 victims, among them 3 sets of remains found in boxes in Des Plaines. The youngest victim was identified as 14 years old, and the oldest was 21 years old. The identities of 5 victims remain unconfirmed. It is estimated that they were between 14 and 30 years of age. A month later, a man called the police to report that he had seen a heavily decomposed body under a tree root while walking along the Des Plaines River. That evening, forensic experts confirmed that the body was indeed Robert's. The autopsy revealed that 3 pieces of cloth had been tightly stuffed into Robert's throat, causing him to die by asphyxiation. John's childhood experiences had profoundly altered his psychology. His father was a severe alcoholic who frequently abused his wife and children, resulting in a very troubled relationship between John and his father. When John was 6 years old, after inadvertently disturbing the engine parts his father was assembling, he was punished with a belt by his father. Although his mother tried to defend him, she was rebuked by her husband. His father called John a weakling and a mama's boy. When John was 7, he and another boy committed a sexual assault on a little girl. John continued to be punished by his father. In that same year, a friend of his father came over to engage in lewd behavior in a truck. Fearing his father's wrath, John never mentioned this incident. A high school friend recalled that John's father would frequently ridicule and physically attack him without any apparent reason. One time, while visiting John's house, the friend witnessed John's father, clearly intoxicated, emerging from the basement, shouting obscenities and physically assaulting John, an assault to which John never once retaliated. John's first job was as a coroner's assistant. One night, while alone in the morgue out of curiosity, John climbed into the coffin of a young deceased man. He embraced and caressed the corpse, an act that gave him an inexplicable thrill. During his second marriage, in his spare time, John began exploring a clown troupe. Members of that troupe would often dress up as clowns and perform at various events. After joining, John created his own clown character named Pogo. It was precisely by exploiting this clown persona that he lured young boys to satisfy his own desires. John concocted various pretexts to entice his victims to his home, where he would show them movies and then coerce them into going to bed with him. If the victims resisted, he would resort to punishment. John committed his first murder 7 years prior during his first marriage. According to John's account, one afternoon, he was driving alone through the Chicago Loop to view an ice sculpture exhibition when he spotted a handsome young man at a Chicago bus stop. Attracted by the young man's good looks, John approached him to strike up a conversation. The young man's name was Timothy, 16. John was a skilled conversationalist, and the two hit it off immediately. John drove Timothy around Chicago, and when night fell, John invited Timothy to stay over at his place, a proposition Timothy accepted. The following morning, when John awoke, he saw Timothy standing at the bedroom door holding a kitchen knife. In a panic, John leaped out of bed and lunged to snatch the knife from Timothy's hand. Startled, Timothy instinctively swung his arm, inadvertently scratching John's arm, a development that convinced John that the young man intended to attack him. Seizing the knife forcefully from Timothy, John grabbed Timothy's head and slammed it against the wall. As Timothy struggled, he kicked John in the stomach. Enraged, John grabbed Timothy by the collar and shouted, "You bastard, I'm going to kill you." Then John beat Timothy to the floor, sat on him, and repeatedly stabbed him in the chest with the knife. After Timothy ceased to resist, John went to the bathroom to clean the knife before returning to the kitchen. It was only then that he noticed that breakfast had already been set on the dining table. Apparently, Timothy had been up early preparing breakfast and intended to wake John. John knew at that moment that he had committed an unspeakable crime. Too late for remorse. He buried Timothy's body in the crawl space beneath his house and later covered it with concrete to conceal the crime. That first murder awakened the demon within John. From that point onward, he went on to commit 32 more murders. Even until his arrest, John showed no remorse. Reflecting on his first crime, John admitted that he experienced an overwhelming and numbing ecstasy. He believed that death was the ultimate form of ecstasy. In February 1980, the trial for John Wayne Gacy began at Cook County Court. After a month-long trial, the court delivered its verdict. John Wayne Gacy was convicted on 33 counts of murder, as well as charges of sexual assault and child molestation, and he was sentenced to death. Gacy did not accept the verdict and appealed. In mid-1984, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld the verdict. Over the following years, Gacy's lawyers made several appeals, until finally, in October 1993, the Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal. On the afternoon of May 9, 1994, at the age of 52, John was allowed to have a final dinner with his family in prison, which featured KFC chicken. Early the following morning, in the presence of a Catholic priest, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. Reports indicate that John had been diagnosed with a mental disorder prior to his execution. He showed no remorse for the crimes he had committed. Even in his final words before his death, John merely stated that his act of killing could never compensate for the losses suffered by others, and he even defiantly said, "Kiss my ass," before dying. The conclusion of John Wayne Gacy closed a dark chapter in the history of American crime, yet the pain and loss endured by the victims' families remain forever. Although the murderer was brought to justice, the identification of 5 sets of remains still remains unresolved, a stark reminder of the deep sorrow left behind. The story of the killer clown not only exposes the brutality of a serial killer, but also serves as a warning about the need for a united and vigilant community. It is our hope that with scientific advances and the diligent efforts of law enforcement, the final victims will be named, bringing some measure of peace to their families. This is a lesson for us all to work towards a society that cares, shares, and protects one another, so that tragedies like this may never occur again. Thank you, and see you in our future videos.